Good day, everyone. Our topic is all about productive uses of tests, unproductive uses of tests, and classification of tests. So first, what is productive? Productive is having the quality or power of producing, especially in abundance. So next, what is test? Test is an instrument designed to measure the capacity, characteristics, skills, and knowledge of the students. So, first is learning analysis. Learning analysis is a test are used to identify the reasons or causes why students do not learn and solution to help them learn. Ideally, a test should be designed to determine what students do not know so that the teacher can take appropriate actions. So in learning analysis, the teacher used tests to know if where are the students struggle the most and also to know if what are the things they must do to make the learning process of the students become better. So for example, in a test, it shows that many students doesn't understand a certain math concept. So that tells to the teachers that the teacher needed to explain it in a different way or give more practice math problem. So learning analysis help teacher understand what blocks the students from learning and so that the teacher also know how to remove that blocks to make their students learn better. So next is improvement of curriculum. So poor performance in a test may indicate that the teacher is not explaining the material effectively. The textbook is not clear, the students are not properly taught, and the students do not see the meaningfulness of the materials. So using a test result to make learning material better. So if the students do poorly in the test, that might means that the textbook is confusing or the teacher needs to explain the lessons differently, or the lessons aren't interesting enough for the students. So the test result helps students figure out if what are the teacher need to change to make learning for the teacher for their students became easier. So next is improvement of teacher. So in a reliable grading system, the class average is the grade the teacher has earned. So test result help teacher get better of teaching. So for their teaching ability. So for example, a teacher gives a test and most of the students do it poorly. So that means that maybe the teacher's way of teaching wasn't really effective and maybe the teacher needed to explain the lessons in a different way and make the lessons more interesting. So test result and improvement of teacher are like a feedback for teachers to know if what are the things they needed to do to be improved. So next is improvement of instructional materials. So tests measure how effective instructional materials are in bringing about intended changes. So using a test, the teacher using a test to see if the things that they teach are actually working. So for example, a teacher use a new textbook but students don't do well on a test about that materials. So this tells that the teacher's textbook might not very effective and by that test result help teachers know which teaching tools are good and which need to be changed or replaced.
Next is individualization. What is individualization? So individualization effective tests always indicate differences in students' learning. This can serve as basis for individual help. So it means that individualization, it refers to tailoring assessment tools or test results to fit the specific abilities, needs, or circumstances of each individual. For example, in a classroom, a teacher wants to assess students' writing abilities and instead of giving the same writing prompt to all students. So next is selection. What is selection? So selection with enrollment opportunity or any other opportunity is limited test can be used to screen those who are more qualified. So selection, it means that refers to choosing the appropriate type of test based on the purpose of the assessment and the abilities being evaluated. For example, in the DDOEC institution, the first year college or incoming freshmen, they need to complete or pass the entrance exam and to follow the standard before entering the school. This typically involves a set of formal procedures or requirements that must be fulfilled before they are officially enrolled in the school or allowed to attend classes. So the next is placement. Placement, this can be used to determine to which category a student belong. So it means that it is strategic timing and positioning of assessment that measure the student's ability to apply knowledge and skills in practical ways. It is a student entry behavior and performance at the beginning of the instruction. So for example, a student is identified as struggling and comprehension and vocabulary, so that the student is placed in a remedial reading group that offers educational support and target the instruction, so that the students to be challenged and continue developing their reading skills. So next is guidance and counseling. So guidance counseling research results from the appropriate test, particularly standardized tests, can help teachers and counselors guide students in assessing future academic and career possibilities. So guidance and counseling, it means that it is the process of helping students to discover and develop their educational, vocational, and potentialities. It is to measure various traits of individuals. For example, if a standardized test reveals a student's aptitude in science and problem solving, a counselor might guide the students towards engineering course.
So these are the unproductive uses of text. First is grading. So what is grading? Tests should not be used as the only determinants in grading to students. Most tests do not accurately reflect a student's performance or true abilities. So in grading, the teacher should not base in the result of that test, but he should base in the overall performance of the students, because in tests there's a possibility of cheating. So to test the true abilities of the students, he should base in the overall performance of the students. Next is labeling. Labeling is often a serious disservice to label a student. Even if the label is positive, negative, labels may lead the students to believe the label and act accordingly to positive labels and negative labels. So in labeling, we should never label our students either positive or negative. Because if we label our students positive, he or she will feel overconfident and superior to others. And if we label our students negative, she will feel self-pity or lose interest in the topic. Next is threatening. Tests lose their as disciplinary measures. So we should never use tests as threatening to students, because it most probably happen that the students will never love the learning process because they will only feel pressured, and it can create a gap between the teacher and the students.
For the continuation of Mr. Ron's discussion, I will be discussing about the unannounced testing. Unannounced testing or surprise tests that are generally not recommended. More often than not, they are scapegoat of teachers who are unprepared, upset by an unruly class, or reprimanded by supervisors or their superiors. So, how does it affect, or how does this factor make our students to become unproductive? Of course, if we go to class and our teachers announce to have a surprise test without us being prepared, what are we going to answer? And probably we can get a low to zero score. And this would make our students, of course, have a low self-confidence, and they will lose the courage or the confidence to study. Sa ating mga estudyante, di ba, if this happen, like for example, our instructor will say, okay class, get one half sheet of paper and we'll have a test. Magiging masaya ba tayo to have a test or a quiz without discussion? Di ba? Hindi. And nandun yung feeling na distracted tayo, naiinis tayo, and this factor can cause also a gap between the student and the teacher. Madalas pa nga nagagalit tayo sa mga, ano ba naman klase instructor to? Hindi naman nag-discuss, pero nagbibigay ng test. So, di ba? Nakaka-distract sa ating mga student at nakakawalang gana. Next is ridiculing. This means using tests to deride students. So, ridiculing. Pag sa Tagalog, yun bang parang minamaliit tayo ng mga teachers or iniinsulto. Especially, nangyayari to pag we have low grades or we are unprepared in our test. May it be oral or a written. And this also can make the student lose interest and disheartened in their studies. And next is the tracking. Students are grouped according to deficiencies as revealed by tests without continuous re-evaluation, thus locking them into categories. So tracking, by the name itself, they are grouped according to deficiencies revealed by tests. Once, for example, at first, we are given a post-test or in our prelim test. Tapos, this certain group got a low score. This certain group got a high score. So, those people who got low score was ridiculed by their instructors. Diba? Without re-evaluating or considering the result of their next test. So what would happen to the student? Of course, they will be sad. Nakaka-discourage mag-aral pag natrato ka ng ganon na instructor. Last is the allocating funds. Some schools exploit tests to solicit for funding. Usually this happens sa mga schools na may tuition fees and every test is may bayad or hindi sila makakapag-take ng mga test nila pag hindi sila nakabayad. So sometimes, para lang makagather sila ng funds na labas naman sa dapat na schedule lang ng test, ito ang nangyayari. Tapos sasabihin yung mga estudyante, hindi ka pwedeng mag-take ng test pag hindi ka nakabayad. So, what would happen, di ba? Nagiging sad yung mga student kasi feeling nila, mababagsak sila pag hindi sila nakapag-test, pero hindi pa nila kaya and they don't have yet the capacity to provide financially para sa test nila. So, these are the factors that can cause students to lose interest, to be sad, para ma-distract sila sa studies nila, and what would happen? Nagiging unproductive tayo because of all these factors.
So next is, what are the benefits of productive uses of tests? Productive uses of tests can greatly benefit us in our research. It can also help us in identifying those exceptional children. So tests can greatly help teachers to identify who are those students who are exceptional. So who are these students that are exceptional? It could be the students who have hearing impairment, visual impairment, or they are psychologically impaired. The next one is it can evaluate the learning program. So Overall, the test can evaluate if the program that is given by the teacher is effective and efficient for the use of the students. So our next step would be the classification of tests. Classification of tests. Throughout the years, psychologists and educators have cooperatively produced new and better tests and scales that measure the students' performance with greater accuracy. So, tests can be classified into 6 parts. The first one would be administration. Administration, when we say administration, it is the body or the people that administers the test. Tests are classified based on how they are given or administered. So there are 2 types of administration. Individual, the first one. So when we say individual, it is given orally and requires the examiner's constant attention since the manner of answering may be as important as the score. This is a test given to an individual alone at a time. For example, personality test or interviews. The next one would be group. For measuring cognitive skills to measure achievement, most tests in schools are considered group tests where different takers are as a group. It is a test given to a group of testees at a time. For example, when we have our prelim, midterm, or finals, this is what we call the group administration of tests. The second one is the scoring. From the word score, it is the process of taking the scores of a given test. There are 2 types of scoring, the objective and subjective. In objective, independent scorers agree on the numbers of points the answer should receive. This is a test in which students are asked to select the right choice from given alternatives or options. The example for this one would be the multiple choice questions or the true or false questions. Subjective. Subjective or answers can be scored through various ways. These are given different values by scores. The example of this one would be essays or performance-based tests. Number 3, sort of response being emphasized. So the third classification of tests would be sort of response being emphasized. So when we say response, it is the feedback or the reaction the students have that is being emphasized in this test. The first one would be the power. This type of questions are those questions that are given ample time to answer, but the emphasized thing is that it is in its difficulty. So, power allows examiners a generous time limit to be able to answer every item. The questions are difficult and this difficulty is what is emphasized. The second one would be speed. With severely limited constraints, but the items are easy and only few examiners are expected to make errors. So when we say speed, you are given questions that are very easy but at a limited time. Like when we have our online class, our teachers tend to give us online quizzes through Mentimeter or quizzes in which we are only given seconds to answer the questions.
So next is the 2 types of response the examinees or the students must take. First is the performance assessment. This assessment requires students to perform a task. This is usually administered individually so that the examiner or the teacher can count the errors and measure the time the examinee or the student has performed in each task. So, it is an assessment approach designed to investigate in each task how a student complete a particular task and demonstrate what he or she has learned. Next is the paper and pencil test. Examinees are asked to write on paper. This type of test is one of the most common and systematic way of gathering information about the learner's behavior and performances. The 5th type of classification of test is what is measured. A is sample. So sample is a limited representative test designed to measure the total behavior of the examinee or the students. Although
No test can exhaustively measure all the knowledge of an individual. So, for example, in a specific lesson or topic, a teacher get not all those covered of those lessons, just a few, just to test if in that particular lesson, her or his students have gained knowledge or have learned the lessons. Next one is sign test. Sign test is a diagnostic test designed to obtain diagnostic signs to suggest that some form of remediation is needed. So diagnostic test is done during the instruction of a teacher, just to know if her or his learning objective is effective or it needs to be changed or improved so that the students can easily understand or learn the specific lesson or topic. The last classification of tests is the nature of the groups being compared. First is the teacher-made test. For the teacher-made test is used within the classroom and contains the subject being taught by the same teacher who constructed the test. So this comprises all tests developed by teachers in school which do not undergo any process of standardization. For example, the classroom test and school examination, just like the entrance exam of a school. Next is the standardized test, constructed by test specialists or experts with the curriculum experts and teachers. This is a test developed by experts and refined through rigorous process of standardization. For example, the NAT test, NCAE, and GLEP.